When you order 2 bespoke platinum engagement rings in 2 different sizes from the exact same jeweler using the exact same loyalty rewards account, you aren't just a serial liar, you are an amateur accountant. I remember the exact tone in which those words were delivered, crisp and utterly devoid of mercy, echoing across a candlelit dining room 6 months later. But on a rainy Tuesday in early October, long before the grand unraveling, Marcus Vance was still playing the role of the century. He was the picture-perfect modern fiancé, 6'2", possessing a jawline that looked like it had been carved by a slightly pretentious European sculptor, and blessed with an executive position at a boutique venture capital firm that allegedly required his physical, undivided presence in Milwaukee 3 days a week. We lived in a sun-drenched loft in Chicago's West Loop. Marcus spent Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesday mornings in Illinois, then dutifully packed his leather weekender bag, kissed my forehead with the practiced reverence of a 1950s sitcom husband, and drove 90 minutes north up the Interstate 94 corridor to handle regional acquisitions in Wisconsin through Friday afternoon. For nearly a year, I accepted this cadence without a shred of suspicion. After all, Marcus was nothing if not meticulously structured. He brought back artisanal kringle from Swedish bakeries in Oconomowoc. He complained with exhausting, cinematic flair about the brutal traffic near the state line. He had a dedicated calendar shared on our phones, color-coded in muted slate blue, detailing client dinner Harley Executive Suite, site audit 3rd Ward Development, and off-site strategy lakefront. It was a beautiful, symmetrical lie. And like most beautiful lies, it relied entirely on the assumption that nobody would ever bother to check the math. The first thread unraveled not through a clandestine text message caught on an unlocked screen, nor through a rogue lipstick stain on a collar. Marcus was far too neat for those amateur blunders. No, the first thread pulled loose because Marcus was fundamentally incapable of turning down a 10% discount code. It happened over breakfast on a crisp Thursday morning. Marcus had departed for Milwaukee at 6 in the morning, or so his text message at 6:15 had claimed. Hit the road early, my darling. Big presentation with the board at 9. Miss you already. I was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping black coffee and casually clearing out the digital clutter of our shared household administration. Since we were planning a September wedding at my family's estate in Lake Geneva, we had established a joint email alias for vendor correspondence, registry updates, and store loyalty accounts. I logged into the customer portal for Vance & Sterling, a high-end estate jeweler in downtown Chicago where Marcus had purchased my emerald-cut diamond ring 8 months prior, to track a repair receipt for my grandmother's vintage bracelet. When I logged in, the system automatically displayed the order history. There was my ring, purchased in November, custom platinum solitaire, emerald cut, 2.4 carats, ring size 5.5. Directly beneath it, dated 3 weeks ago, was a second entry, custom platinum solitaire, oval cut, 2.1 carats, ring size 7.0. Delivery address, 1420, North Prospect Avenue, Apartment 4B, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I stared at the screen for a long, quiet minute. The steam from my coffee rose into the morning sunlight. I didn't scream. I didn't spill my coffee. I didn't break into a dramatic sweat. My mother always said that the women of the Sterling family reacted to sudden crises not with hysteria, but with an alarming, icy silence that made insurance adjusters deeply uncomfortable. "Oh, poor darling," I said, letting just enough sweet, domestic sympathy bleed into my tone. "Did the presentation go well?" "Exhausting, but we got the sign off," he lied seamlessly, without a second of hesitation. I could hear the faint sound of jazz music and clinking glassware in the background. He was clearly sitting at a high-end lounge, likely waiting for Victoria to finish work. "I swear, these travel weeks are draining the life out of me, Elena. I do it all for us, though. Every single mile on the highway is for our future." "You are so dedicated, Marcus," I said softly. "It really doesn't go unnoticed. How is your day going, my love? Did you get the wedding caterer locked in for Lake Geneva?" "Working on it right now, actually," I said, smiling at the wall. In fact, I was thinking we should do something special for our engagement party next month. Something comprehensive. A real gathering of everyone who matters. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, Marcus replied smoothly. Whatever you want. You know I trust your taste implicitly. Listen, I have to jump into a dinner with the VP of operations, but I'll call you before I go to bed, okay? Of course. Don't work too hard, Marcus. Never do. Love you, Elena. Love you too, Marcus. I hung up the phone and looked down at my notepad. Over the next 2 weeks, the domestic theater continued with terrifying precision. Marcus returned to Chicago every Sunday evening like clockwork, carrying his dry-cleaned suits, kissing me on the cheek, complaining about the construction on I-94, and discussing our upcoming wedding plans over dinner. He sat across from my parents at their club, discussing golf handicaps with my father and offering opinions on floral arrangements to my mother. He was magnificent. If deception were an Olympic sport, Marcus Vance would have been draped in gold medals. He didn't know that every time he left his phone face down on the coffee table, Grant's software was logging his location history via our smart home network. He didn't know that Grant had hired a discreet private investigator in Milwaukee to document his dual life with photographic precision. And he certainly didn't know that I had spent the last fortnight engaging in a very careful, very strategic digital reconnaissance mission regarding Victoria Ross. Victoria was, as Grant had predicted, sharp, successful, and deeply invested in her community. She was active in local charity boards, organized quarterly marketing galas, and possessed a social media presence that was organized with corporate efficiency. Through the investigators' reports, we learned the full mechanics of Marcus's double life. In Chicago, he was Marcus Vance, the rising venture capitalist engaged to Elena Sterling, daughter of Arthur Sterling, senior partner at Sterling and Vance Law. Here, his narrative was built around high-stakes Chicago finance and long, grueling corporate commutes to regional sites in Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, he was Marcus Vance, the hard-working regional director engaged, or about to be engaged, to Victoria Ross. There, his narrative was built around high-stakes Wisconsin acquisitions and long, grueling corporate commutes to corporate headquarters in Chicago. He had split his life cleanly down the state line. He had 2 sets of friends who never crossed paths, 2 favorite Italian restaurants, 2 distinct personalities. With me, he played the refined, intellectual urbanite who appreciated rare wines and classical architecture. With Victoria, according to her public posts and local sightings, he played the rugged, athletic outdoorsman who loved weekend hiking in Door County and craft beer tastings. He was customizing his personality to fit the woman in front of him. It's almost fascinating from a psychological standpoint, Grant remarked one evening as we reviewed the private investigator's latest photos over takeout sushi in my loft. He isn't just cheating. Cheating is lazy. Cheating is meeting someone in a hotel room on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus has constructed a fully functioning parallel reality. He has 2 domestic identities running concurrently. Why? I asked, looking at a photo of Marcus helping Victoria carry groceries into her Prospect Avenue building, looking every inch the attentive partner. Why not just pick one? Because Marcus doesn't want a partner, Elena, Grant said, dipping a piece of yellowtail into soy sauce. Marcus wants an audience. You give him entry into Chicago high society and Dad's network. Victoria gives him the local prestige and the image of the grounded, successful Milwaukee power couple. He wants both trophies on his mantelpiece, and he actually believes he's smart enough to keep them from bumping into each other. Well, I said, setting my chopsticks down with a quiet click. It's time to introduce the trophies to each other. The opportunity presented itself with exquisite perfection 3 weeks later. Marcus came home on a Wednesday evening, looking appropriately exhausted. He threw his leather bag by the door, wrapped his arms around me, and let out a dramatic, soul-weary sigh. God, what a week, he groaned, rubbing his temples with theatrical exhaustion. The Milwaukee office is a war zone right now. I'm doing the work of 3 people, Elena. I swear, if I wasn't doing this for our future, I'd walk away tomorrow. You poor thing, I said, stroking his hair with pure, unadulterated sarcasm that he was far too self-absorbed to detect. You work so hard for us. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you tonight. Marcus pulled back slightly, his dark eyes sparkling with gentle curiosity. Oh. What's up? My parents want to host an intimate engagement dinner next month, I said, smiling warmly. Just family, close friends, and a few key business associates. Dad wants to announce our wedding date formally at the club in Lake Geneva. Marcus's eyes flickered for a fraction of a millisecond, a subtle, microscopic twitch of panic that only someone who had spent 2 years observing him would ever notice. Lake Geneva, he repeated softly. Next month? Sweetheart, my schedule in November is absolute murder. The cue for restructuring. Marcus, I interrupted smoothly, taking both of his hands in mine and looking directly into his eyes with wide, innocent devotion. It's already set. Dad reserved the main dining pavilion at the Riviera Club for Saturday, November 12th. He's already spoken to your parents. They've agreed to fly in from Boston. Marcus froze. The mention of his parents was the master stroke. Grant had personally called Marcus's elderly, blissfully unaware parents in Massachusetts a week prior, posing as our wedding planner, confirming their flight arrangements and luxury hotel accommodations in Lake Geneva for the weekend of November 12th. Marcus was trapped. To refuse now would mean explaining to his own mother why he wasn't attending his own engagement dinner. They're flying in? Marcus stammered, his polished composure hairline fracturing for the first time. Of course. I beamed. Your mother was thrilled. She said she hasn't seen you since July. It's going to be magical, Marcus. Everyone we love in one room. Marcus swallowed hard. He forced a broad, stunning smile back onto his face, though his eyes were darting frantically as his internal computer calculated the staggering logistical hazard he was suddenly facing. That sounds incredible, my love, he managed to say, his voice strained. November 12th. I'll make sure my calendar is completely clear. Oh, don't worry about your calendar, I said, patting his cheek gently. I've already taken care of everything. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have guessed, was that miles to the north, Victoria Ross had received an anonymous, exquisitely customized invitation in her corporate mail 2 days prior. It was an invitation to an exclusive, high-level regional women in leadership and executive marketing summit, fully sponsored and hosted at the prestigious Lake Geneva Riviera Pavilion on Saturday, November 12th. Victoria had been selected as a keynote panelist, complete with an all-expenses-paid luxury weekend package, a $5,000 speaking honorarium funded by a Shell LLC grant had set up 3 days earlier, and a VIP dinner reservation in the main hall. The trap was set. The venue was locked. The invitations were delivered. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks visibly unraveling under the weight of his own grand design. I watched him with quiet, vindictive fascination. He was constantly slipping away into the bathroom to send frantic, hushed text messages. He was losing weight. The manicured composure he wore like a second skin was beginning to fray at the edges. He was perpetually jumpy, double-checking his phones. He had quietly acquired a second device, which Grant's team was actively monitoring, and trying to manage 2 women who were rapidly converging on the exact same coordinate in time and space. On the Thursday morning before the big weekend, Marcus packed his weekender bag in our West Loop loft. I'll see you Friday night at the lake house, right? I asked, leaning against the bedroom doorframe as he zipped his bag shut. Actually, darling, Marcus said, offering a tight, stressed smile, I might have to drive straight to Lake Geneva on Saturday morning. A massive emergency came up with the Milwaukee client. I have to be on site all day Friday and late into Friday night to put out the fire. Oh, what a shame, I said, my voice dripping with soft, comforting pity. You must be exhausted, Marcus. Crying without tears is so bad for the skin, and you've been doing so much of it lately. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the strange phrase. What? I said work must be so tiresome, I corrected smoothly, offering a bright, dazzling smile. Don't worry about Friday night. Just make sure you arrive on Saturday by 5 o'clock sharp. The presentation starts at 6, and you definitely don't want to miss the opening remarks. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Marcus said, kissing my cheek. No, I whispered as the front door clicked shut behind him. You certainly won't. I walked over to the window and watched his sleek silver Audi pull out of the garage and head north toward the freeway. I picked up my phone and dialed my brother. Marcus, his father barked across the room, his voice heavy with authority. Is this true? Dad, no. Listen to me. Marcus cried, turning around in a circle like a trapped animal. He clutched his hair, his manicured image completely disintegrating into a pathetic, sweating mess. They manipulated the audio. It's AI. Grant works in tech. He constructed all of this to destroy my reputation because I wouldn't let his firm underwrite our acquisition deal. I couldn't help but laugh, a soft, melodic laugh that carried right through the microphone. AI, Marcus? Really? I asked, looking at him with mild, amused pity. That's the performance you're choosing for the grand finale? Crying without tears is bad for the skin, darling, and you're sweating right through your bespoke tuxedo. Victoria reached into her designer clutch, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen a few times. She held it up toward Marcus's face, displaying a vibrant lock screen photo of the two of them kissing in front of the Lake Geneva waterfront just 6 days ago. Explain this one, Marcus, Victoria said coldly. You told me you were taking me to a private, romantic dinner to celebrate our anniversary. You told me you rented a private cottage because you hated the corporate feel of the main resort. And the reason he rented that private cottage, Grant chimed in smoothly from the AV booth, was because our family has owned a lakefront home 3 miles down the shoreline for 30 years. If he had brought you to the main dining room last weekend, he would have run directly into Elena's cousin, who was hosting her rehearsal dinner here. Marcus looked from the lock screen to the projection board, then back to the room full of 50 high society figures, clients, mentors, legal partners, and his own weeping mother, all watching him crumble in real time. The theatrical misdirection he had relied on his entire life was useless here. Every exit was blocked by hard, verifiable data. Elena, please, Marcus whimpered, stepping toward me, his hands shaking as he reached out in desperation. Can we talk about this in private? Just 5 minutes. Please. I loved you, I love both of you, I got confused, I was under so much corporate stress. Don't touch her, a deep, firm voice thundered from the side of the stage. My father stepped forward. Arthur Sterling was 6'3", possessed silver hair, and had spent 40 years dismantling fraudulent corporate executives in federal courtrooms. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Arthur, please, you know me. Marcus pleaded, turning his frantic gaze toward my father. I've worked so hard for this family. I've been a loyal partner to Elena. You aren't a partner, Marcus, my father said coldly, stepping between Marcus and me. You are an amateur con man who mistook our politeness for stupidity. You brought your double life into my daughter's home, you used my family's reputation to elevate your firm's profile, and you had the utter audacity to host your secondary romance in our hometown. My father paused, adjusting the cuff of his suit jacket with terrifying composure. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, my father continued smoothly, Sterling and Vance Law has formally terminated its advisory contract with your firm. I spoke with your managing partner 20 minutes ago. When presented with the forensic audit of your expense reports, which show you were double billing corporate travel between Chicago and Milwaukee to cover your romantic commutes, he informed me that your termination is effective immediately, pending a formal board review for corporate embezzlement. A sharp gasp went up from the table where Marcus's colleagues were sitting. Two of his junior associates immediately lowered their heads, furiously typing on their phones to report the news back to headquarters. Marcus's face turned from pale white to a sick, ashen gray. Embezzlement? No, I build the travel under regional development. You build the travel under client acquisition while checking into luxury boutique hotels with Miss Ross, Grant added from the console, flashing an expense receipt on the screen showing a $3,000 resort bill stamped with Marcus's corporate card. Your accounting was as sloppy as your loyalty rewards, Marcus. You really shouldn't let your personal desires interfere with your corporate ledger. Victoria stepped up beside me, turning her gaze from Marcus to look directly at me. For a second, the two of us shared a silent, profound moment of mutual understanding. We were two accomplished, intelligent women who had been selected by a narcissistic fraud to play complementary roles in his personal vanity project. I believe this belongs to you, Victoria said calmly, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small, velvet ring box. She didn't open it, she simply tossed it onto the glass table next to the stage, where it landed with a dull, heavy thud. Or maybe you can return it to Vance and Sterling for store credit. Lord knows you're going to need the cash. Victoria, no. Please don't do this. Marcus cried, taking a step toward her, but Victoria didn't even turn around. She adjusted her dress, looked at my parents, and offered a polite, dignified nod. Thank you for the invitation to the summit, Mr. Sterling, Victoria said smoothly to my father. It was easily the most productive conference I've ever attended. The pleasure was ours, Miss Ross, my father replied with genuine warmth. My driver is waiting outside to take you back to Milwaukee whenever you are ready. I think I'll stay for a glass of champagne first, Victoria said, offering me a sharp, appreciative smile. I'd hate to miss the rest of the show. Please, join us, I said, stepping back to let her stand beside my family. Marcus was left standing alone in the center of the floor, framed by the blinding glare of the projection screen displaying his dual receipts. His navy tuxedo, once the symbol of his polished, effortless charm, now looked like a costume for a play that had been cancelled mid-scene. Elena. Marcus whispered, his voice cracking, tears finally welling up in his eyes, real tears this time, born not of sorrow or regret, but of total, unmitigated public humiliation. Please. Tell me what I can do to fix this. I looked at him, feeling a sudden lightness in my chest. The entire performance was over. The lie had been completely dismantled, piece by piece, receipt by receipt, in front of everyone who mattered. You can't fix a phantom, Marcus, I said softly into the microphone, my voice steady and completely unbothered. Because the man we were both engaged to never actually existed. I turned to Grant and gave him a tiny, decisive nod. Grant hit the spacebar on his keyboard. The split-screen evidence faded away, replaced by a single, high-definition slide featuring a plain white background with bold, black, high society typography that read, "Thank you for attending the formal uncoupling of Elena Sterling and Marcus Vance. Please enjoy the open bar and artisanal catering." And now, I announced, raising my champagne glass high above my head as the room erupted into a mix of stunned applause, laughter, and enthusiastic chatter from my friends and family, if everyone could please direct their attention to the bar. The 1996 Dom Perignon is officially on Marcus's corporate tab. Marcus stood frozen for 3 more seconds, the full weight of his ruin settling over his shoulders. Then, as his own father turned his back on him to comfort his mother, Marcus spun around, put his head down, and practically ran toward the exit doors, the sound of popping champagne corks and polite laughter echoing after him into the cool autumn night. The heavy oak double doors slammed shut behind Marcus with a hollow, echoing thud that sounded remarkably like a coffin lid clicking into place. Inside the Riviera Pavilion, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The tension that had held 50 high society guests in a breathless grip dissolved into a hum of animated conversation, clinking glassware, and low, appreciative chuckles. Dean, ever the consummate host, stepped out of the AV booth, smoothly signaling the catering staff to begin circulating the champagne trays. Victoria walked over to where my brother and I were standing, holding a newly poured glass of Dom Perignon. She took a slow sip, looking down at the small velvet ring box sitting on the glass table near the stage. "Size 7, she said, her voice dropping into a dry, reflective cadence. "He actually got my ring size right. I'll give him 20 points for basic observation, even if he loses 10,000 for administrative fraud." "Don't give him too much credit," I replied, offering a faint, wry smile as I took a glass from a passing server's tray. "He probably checked the tag on a pair of your winter gloves while you were in the shower." Marcus was remarkably methodical when it came to gathering data for his performances. "It's bizarre," Victoria mused, leaning against the edge of the stage, her dark emerald dress catching the soft light of the crystal chandeliers. Sitting across from a man for over a year, sharing Sunday morning coffee, discussing mortgage rates and vacation spots in Door County, and realizing every single word out of his mouth was calculated to maintain a fictional character. "That was his real talent," Grant chimed in, stepping up beside us with a plate of seared tuna crostini. Marcus didn't just lie, he catered his lies to his target audience. With Elena, he played the refined, high-finance intellectual who needed a sophisticated partner to anchor his Chicago ascension. With you, Victoria, he played the grounded, hard-working regional director who just wanted a peaceful, authentic life in Milwaukee. "He customized us," Victoria said, shaking her head. "Or rather, he customized himself to fit what he thought we wanted." "Precisely," I said. "And in doing so, he made one fatal mistake." "Which was?" Victoria asked, raising an eyebrow. "He assumed women like us don't compare notes," I said softly, touching my champagne glass to hers with a clear, metallic clink. While the guests mingled and my parents gracefully handled the bewildered inquiries from Marcus's former business associates, the real fallout was already cascading far beyond the walls of the Riviera Pavilion. By 6:30, Marcus's mother had been quietly escorted to a private lounge upstairs by my mother, who, despite her icy demeanor during the slideshow, possessed a strict old money code of hospitality that extended even to the mothers of catastrophic fraudsters. Marcus's father, however, remained downstairs. Arthur Sterling and the senior Vance stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the darkening waters of Lake Geneva, engaged in a low, furious discussion regarding corporate liability. "He used the corporate card for the resort in Kohler, Arthur," the elder Mr. Vance said, rubbing his face with weathered, trembling hands. "He told our board it was a client retention weekend for the Midwest Logistics account." "Your board is going to be the least of his worries by Monday morning," my father replied smoothly, his hands resting naturally in his trouser pockets. "When Grant ran the preliminary audit on the shared vendor accounts 3 days ago, we discovered Marcus had established 3 separate corporate credit lines under modified variations of your firm's parent LLC. He wasn't just double billing travel expenses, Robert. He was floating personal debt across state lines to maintain the appearance of liquid wealth in 2 separate luxury markets." The elder Mr. Vance looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. God in heaven, how did he think he was going to sustain it? "And what did Judge Miller say?" I asked, taking a quiet sip of my coffee. Judge Miller noted that acute situational stress is a predictable side effect of facing 7 counts of financial fraud and corporate misrepresentation, Victoria replied, her lips curving into a dry, dangerous smile. The continuance was denied with prejudice. "He's inside right now, sitting at the defense table with a public defender who looks like she'd rather be literally anywhere else in the Midwest." Grant stepped out of the heavy double doors of courtroom 302, adjusting the cuffs of his gray suit jacket. He carried a thin leather briefcase that held the finalized, court-certified forensic ledger of Marcus Vance's 18-month dual existence. "It's wrapped up," Grant announced smoothly, leaning against the marble wall opposite us. "The judge just signed the consent decree." "Details?" I asked. "Total financial capitulation," Grant said, tapping his briefcase with 2 fingers. The second engagement ring, the 2-carat oval, has been formally surrendered to the court trustee to satisfy the outstanding civil claims filed by Sterling and Vance Law. The corporate card debt he racked up while double billing his romantic commutes has been converted into a formal restitution order payable to his former firm over the next 8 years. If he misses a single monthly installment, the deferred fraud charges get reinstated immediately. And his current employment status? Victoria inquired, closing her folder with a satisfying snap. He's currently working as a mid-level shift supervisor at a regional car rental agency outside Logan Airport, Grant answered with genuine, unbridled sibling delight. His father refused to pay for a private defense attorney after the board review in December. His mother sent him a box of his childhood books and told him to find an apartment in South Boston. From a West Loop luxury loft to a car rental counter, I mused softly. That is a staggering shift in executive positioning. Well, Grant chuckled, he always did enjoy managing fleet vehicles and tracking travel schedules. At least now he's doing it legally. The heavy courtroom doors creaked open again, and Marcus Vance stepped out into the bright marble corridor. If the man who had entered the Riviera Pavilion 6 months ago was a polished, high society illusion, the man standing in the Milwaukee courthouse was the stark, unvarnished reality. Marcus had lost at least 15 pounds. His bespoke navy tuxedo had been replaced by an off-the-rack gray suit that hung loosely on his shoulders, slightly frayed at the cuffs. The confident, golden boy posture was entirely gone, replaced by a slumping, defensive posture that made him look remarkably small beneath the soaring courthouse ceilings. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the three of us standing together near the elevator bay. For a long, silent moment, nobody moved. The sound of footsteps echoing from the floor below was the only audio in the grand corridor. Marcus looked at me in my navy silk, then at Victoria in her cream trench coat, and finally at Grant, who offered him a polite, razor-sharp nod of professional farewell. Marcus took a slow, hesitating step toward us, his mouth opening as if to deliver one last line, one final, dramatic monologue to rescue his ego from total annihilation. Elena. Victoria. Marcus began, his voice raspy, completely devoid of its old, purring resonance. I want you both to know that despite how everything was presented in that room, what I felt for both of you wasn't a complete lie. I got trapped in a cycle I couldn't control. I was trying to build something real. Marcus, I interrupted smoothly, setting my empty espresso cup on a glass side table. My voice was quiet, completely devoid of anger, bitterness, or dramatic heat. It was the voice of an auditor closing a file. Crying without tears is still bad for the skin. And you really shouldn't waste what's left of yours. Marcus froze. He looked at Victoria, desperate for a sliver of sympathy, a flicker of nostalgia, or even a flash of righteous anger he could feed on. Victoria simply pulled her sunglasses from her lapel, slid them over her eyes, and adjusted her handbag over her shoulder. The parking meter outside expires in 4 minutes, Elena, Victoria said, turning her back on him without a second thought. Let's go get lunch. There's a wonderful seafood place on the river, Grant suggested, pressing the elevator call button. My treat. We can toast to balanced ledgers and single-occupancy apartments. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, melodic chime. The three of us stepped inside, turning around to face the corridor. As the polished brass doors began to slide shut, the last sight we had of Marcus Vance was a lonely, diminished figure standing alone under the harsh fluorescent lights of the third-floor hallway, clutching a cheap paper folder of court documents, completely stripped of his audience, his scripts, his luxury leases, and his beautiful, symmetrical lies. The doors clicked shut. The elevator descended smoothly toward the street, and for the first time in 18 months, the math was absolute, unassailable, and completely clear.